I've been working on bringing it down, but I currently have about 10,000 unread emails, probably 5,000 uncleared notifications on my phone, and I would guess maybe 1,000 unanswered comments on my YouTube channel. Today, instead of just typing out some replies, I'm going to give an actual video response to some of my unanswered comments, including a couple of comments that came across to me as a wee bit snarky. If you don't know who I am, my name is Peter, and in 2020, I moved from Oklahoma to the west coast of Scotland. Most of my content on my channel so far has been talking about moving from the US to Scotland and differences in the culture, language, etc. If that kind of thing interests you, I hope you stick around and give us a wee subscribe. I really do try to respond to a large percentage of the comments I get, or at least give them the wee heart react, but it all boils down to how many hours are in the day and how much mental capacity I have for being social. I have 5-year-old twins and they will always be my top priority, so especially over the summer holidays, my YouTube energy is relegated to days that I'm both partially caught up on housework and the kids are with their mom, but give me another year or two and I'm sure I'll draft them into being my personal assistants to do all the planning, filming, and editing of my videos for me. It's not child labor if I call it a family business, right? Anyways, let's get started with going over some of these comments. You talked about disgusting ranch. You know they have Newman's Own over here? I know they have Newman's Own here. I tried it once, never again. Ranch dressing is immensely popular in the United States, but almost non-existent in, I think, all or at least most of Europe. The best and most popular brand is Hidden Valley Ranch, but of course there are plenty of alternatives and store brands of ranch. Some are better than others, but they all do taste fairly similar. Newman's Own is one of the more expensive brands of ranch in the US, and while it's not terrible, I never was too crazy about it. When I moved here, I looked for ranch, and Newman's Own is the only kind that's fairly regularly available here, at least if you go to the bigger shops like big Tesco's or probably Sainsbury's. But I tried it and it was disgusting, to me at least. Most American food is banned over here with good reason, which means that products like Newman's Own Ranch, while it might look similar or have the same branding, it's a completely different recipe, and I found it didn't taste like ranch dressing at all to me. It's kind of like the Doritos brand nacho cheese dip that they sell here, except I didn't think it was good at all. Now, the Doritos brand nacho cheese dip, it's great, but it absolutely does not taste like nacho cheese. I think of it as more of a kind of a Chipotle mayo knockoff, and it's really good to add to sandwiches and quesadillas. Next comment. Why pay for an AC unit when you can just open a window? Here in the UK, we only get about a fortnight of unbearable heat if we're lucky. I completely get where you're coming from on this. I've talked a couple times on my videos about how I wish the houses here all had central heat and air or HVAC systems like what I've always had in the States. Especially up here in Scotland, it isn't really all that often that you need AC, but here's where I'm coming from on this. When you need it, you need it. Central heat and air isn't just about air conditioning, it's just as much about heating, airflow, and getting rid of those awful radiators. While Aircon isn't needed more than maybe about 4 to 6 weeks a year, the beauty of these systems is that you just kind of set it and forget it. You set a temperature and it automatically keeps the house at that temperature. Opening a window isn't always a great option because the windows here don't have screens, so you're just asking to get bees and all kinds of bugs coming in the house. And it's also reliant on a breeze, which isn't always present. I do have one of those window air conditioning units, which is fantastic, but still much more of a faff than if it was just built into the house. It also only really works well for one room at a time, so I probably just need to bite the bullet and buy a second one so I can be comfortable both upstairs and downstairs in the dead of summer. Moving on. Why didn't you move to Germany? I do have an American accent, but I am just as much German as I am American. Thanks to EU free movement laws, I can live and work anywhere in the European Union without having to get a visa, and those rights extended to my American wife as well since we were married at the time. Back in 2020, my biggest concern was leaving the United States so that my kids wouldn't have to grow up there, and of course there were pros and cons with both countries. If we would have moved to Germany, it probably would have made some things like social and family life better, since depending on which city we ended up in, I would have been close to family to see family and help with the kids and everything. But I also love Scotland, and the cost of living here is cheaper than in Germany. Also, my now ex-wife doesn't speak German, so there would have been a pretty big language barrier with moving there. So ultimately, we decided on Scotland because we both love it here, and it didn't come with as much of a language barrier. I do also love that my kids have developed Scottish accents. If I was from Oklahoma, I would have left too. Since you find the grass greener there, are you giving up your American passport? I bet not. The snark in this one is strong. I usually just ignore the trolls, but I'll entertain it today and maybe you'll learn something new. I have no idea how it works for other countries, but for the United States, you can't just give up your American passport. That's not how any of this works. I live in Scotland as a German, and I use my German passport or my UK driving license for everything. I think the only time I would ever need my American passport is if I were to go to the States on a holiday, which might not ever happen again. Other than that, it stays in my safe collecting dust, but I don't want to and I can't just give it up. There are a few reasons for this, but as it stands now, cost is really the biggest deciding factor. It would be super expensive to renounce my US citizenship, and I wouldn't really gain much from doing it. If you want to renounce your US citizenship, it costs about $2,500 just to make the application, and that's a non-refundable fee. There are several reasons why they could deny your application, and one of them is if you're renouncing to avoid taxes. One of the great gifts my American citizenship gives me is the fact that even though I will never live there again, I still have to pay money to file taxes and report my UK income to the United States every single year. My kids will also have to do this as soon as they turn 18, even though they haven't lived in the US since they were 10 months old. But even if you're okay with paying the $2,500 application fee, that's not the end of it. They have what's called an exit tax. Basically, they calculate your entire worldwide net worth and make you pay taxes on the hypothetical sale of all your assets. So for example, if you own a house in the UK worth £1 million and you renounce your US citizenship, you will have to pay taxes to the US based on the value of that house in the UK, even if you're not actually selling it. I haven't researched all the details about renouncing my US citizenship because I don't want to, but the cost alone means that I don't think I really could, even if I did want to, at least not easily. Now I am getting old, I have got my first automatic car. Grr, I see that an automatic drives you, whereas you drive a manual. Much better for narrow, winding country roads where an auto changes down always too late. I completely get where you're coming from on this. Personally, I wish there was some magical way to mix having both types of transmissions. I prefer a manual in most driving situations, especially windy country roads. But if I'm stuck in slow start-stop traffic, an automatic is much easier. As far as it changing down too late, I don't know specifically what kind of automatic car you have, but it could be that it's not actually an automatic transmission. This is a mistake I made with the first car I bought after getting my UK driving license. It was an automatic transmission, but what I didn't realize at first was that it wasn't actually automatic. It was a semi-automatic. All my life in the States, I'd never heard of or driven a semi-automatic car. It's always been a torque conversion gearbox or a proper automatic. I'm not a mechanic, but I would say that if your gearbox is jerky or changing gears too late, it would probably be because there's something wrong with it, unless it's a semi-automatic. Semi-automatic gearboxes are different in that they're basically just manual transmissions with a robot bolted on to operate the clutch and change gears for you. And at least in the case of the Peugeot I owned, it is a very stupid robot. It was dangerously jerky and consistently chose the wrong gear. I swear it was worse at changing gears than I was when I was 16 years old driving my first manual transmission truck with no prior experience or lessons. I found Americans, when driving over here, they tend to hit the curb a lot. I seriously worry about them driving here with the road differences. I recommend put a piece of sticky tape on the dash to remind them to drive on the left. This makes me laugh because it is so true. Being the devil's advocate though, I suppose I can understand why they're like that without even getting into the fact that Americans are, in general, not very good drivers, and the testing requirements in the States are a joke. Driving on the left does mess with your head a bit if it's your first time. And I don't necessarily mean driving on the left side of the road. It's that you're physically driving from the right side of the car instead of the left side. It does mess with your muscle memory and depth perception a little bit at first when you're getting used to it. And the roads here are significantly narrower than they would be back in the States. One bonus to all of this though is that the curbs here are probably 2 or 3 times shorter than what they are in the States, so you might not do quite as much damage to your car if you do hit the curb. Midges, the horror. I 100% agree with you. I don't think I'll ever complain about mosquitoes again now that I've experienced the horrors of midges, and it's only getting worse. Not many people know this, but the primary predator to midges are wild haggis. Haggi naturally release pheromones that kind of act like a poison to midges, and the effects of it increase exponentially when there's a large group of haggi. If you're within about a 2-mile radius of a stooshy of haggi, you'll find that there are 0 problems with midges, but sadly the wild haggis population is dwindling due to years of overhunting. And it's made the midget population increase by something like 2,500% in the last 10 years. I was actually reading an article the other day about it, and scientists say that by 2040, the entire Scottish Highlands will be uninhabitable in the summers because of the solid black clouds of misery. I mean, midges. Man, I don't know, just moved to Aberdeen and it seems like the public transportation is lacking quite a bit. Here's the thing about public transportation in Scotland. I know there are plenty of things about it that I could and sometimes do complain about, like the reliability of the buses or the cost of train tickets. But you got to realize, in this video, I was comparing it to the United States. And yeah, if you're in New York City, Chicago, or Los Angeles, you might have decent or even good public transportation. But the vast majority of American cities and towns have either 0 public transportation or public transportation that's so bad it's completely unusable. I know it's a low bar to raise, but yeah, especially when you compare it to the US, public transportation in Scotland is pure dead brilliant. I couldn't physically drink 1 liter of fizzy drink, let alone 2. These little glasses fill me up and I don't like ice or lemon in my drink. In this video, I was talking about free refills and said that at a restaurant in the US, I could probably go through 2 liters of Dr. Pepper before even getting my food and nobody would bat an eye. Just like you, I couldn't or wouldn't want to drink 2 liters before getting my food. That was hyperbole to emphasize my point. But honestly, it wasn't even that much of a stretch because while I personally wouldn't drink 2 liters before getting my food, I can't confidently say that there aren't people in the US that would. And while personally I don't want lemon in my drink, lime is a different story. Lime goes with almost anything. On holiday in America, once I was asked if we had television in Scotland, satisfying to answer that we invented the fucking thing. Yes, good old American exceptionalism. So many things that we take for granted today were discovered or invented or perfected in Scotland or other countries, and many Americans have no idea. True story. Back in 2014, I went to a photography conference in Dubai. I was telling a colleague about my plans, and I'm not making this up. They told me not to drink the water. They thought that since it's the Middle East, they don't have clean water. This might be more hyperbole, but many Americans think that European countries are like 50 years behind them and that every other country is a dangerous, poverty-stricken, unsafe place, and that's simply not true. If anything, it might be closer to the opposite of that. Anyways, thanks for sticking around to the end. Hopefully I can get back to a slightly more regular video posting routine as the summer holidays are finally winding down and the kids get back to a normal school schedule. I adore my kids and love spending time with them, but I must say it's interesting how when you have young kids, the holidays are in many ways less relaxing than the non-holidays. Anyways, that's it for today. I will see you next time.